Welcome back to Winter Wolf's Den, guys. I'm back with King Z. We're going to be talking about Andor episodes 2 and 3 in a bit of a double feature for you guys today because we're short on time and the show might be short on my patience, but we're going to get into a little bit of that later. Got a couple of thoughts, but first I want to introduce my immaculately amazing partner in crime, King Z. Buddy, what's going on, dude?
What's going on, everybody? Glad to be back for episode 2 and 3 today. I'm ready to dive in.
Dude, let's do this. So I'm going to hit him with the synopsis for episode 2. So always, I'll kick it over to you first to run down the technical aspects, because I know you've always dug up some dirt on these guys. Andor episode 2 is That Would Be Me. Little synopsis done up for you guys. It's Tim, still suspicious of Bix's relationship with Cassian, reports Cassian to Pre-More Security, who issue a warrant for his arrest. Karn partners with Mosk, an equally dutiful Pre-More officer, to arrest Cassian. B2EMO informs Cassian and Marva of the warrant, sending Marva into a panic. Cassian prepares to flee the planet, but meanwhile, Bix's buyer, Luthen Rail, is on his way, and he's traveling straight to Ferrix to obtain the Star Path unit that Andor is trying to sell to pay for his exit strategy. Dude, what do you got for me on this one?
So, I believe episode 2 really could have been divided between episode 1 and episode 3. They didn't need a separate episode. The big reveal in episode 2 was how he became Andor from Cassis, from his home planet, which I thought was pretty... it was there to explain his backstory, and I think they're doing a really good job, even though it is an extremely slow build.
Yeah.
But I know they don't want to rush it too much because they are trying to build a character and his supporting cast.
Dude, true. I think when I did a little bit of background digging on this one, this was another Tony Gilroy. I think he has episodes 2, 3, and 4. I think he's extended out pretty good into the first clump of them.
Yeah, same thing. It's the same director and same DP for the first 3 episodes.
Oh, true. It's the first 3. Cool. So that means they're totally going to be experiencing a little bit of the continuity that we were talking about off camera before we started the show. Also, I forgot on the synopsis on this one. We get the typical Disney Plus MCU Star Wars flashback in this one as well. We get Casa, that's younger Andor, and his cohorts locating the downed ship near what looks like a strip mining operation or a quarry or something. It was something big going on out there.
Was it me,
on his
or
home
did
planet.
It look like from, was it Attack of the Clones, episode 2 of the movies? Didn't it look like where they had the battle, the Jedi versus the droids?
Oh, yeah, that was Attack of the Clones. What planet was that? That was Geonosis, though, I think. At the end
I think it was, but it
2.
had the same type of feel to it, where it was like
It did. It had a weird kind of Aztec pyramid AVP Alien versus Predator vibe, I thought. Like everything was angled in like 90 degree, just like step downs to like, and it was a giant area that they were rolling through to find that down ship. But we do get a little bit more development just from the earlier flashback side of stuff where the kids are going to check out the ship and the leader of the group takes a blaster bolt and they end up having to blow dart the guy to put her down, but they seem to they don't bother going in the ship. They all turn back to the camp, but he kind of stays behind and you're definitely getting the eyeball that like he's going to go into the ship by himself. But I don't think he doesn't actually get in until episode 3, I think that's the only flashback in episode 2 we get are those events where she gets wounded or killed. We don't really know how she is right now.
Yeah.
But other than that, let's move on and rip through the scene so we don't take up too much time for our fine viewers today. We covered the Kenari kids finding the quarry to the downed ship. Right after that, we got Cassian's hometown is basically clocking into or out of work. We get the charming sounds of those bells being rung, and that dude really enjoys his job. Like, that guy put the gong ringing up to an art form. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on him, but I just wanted to point out my admiration for him doing that. Unless you got something you want to toss in on him.
Well, I mean, if you remember in episode 1, when he was back on his home planet, you remember that they centered on that tower. He walked out of frame and they still held the shot with the tower. So you know the tower had something big with that community. Now we see that it's used to mark time of day. You have them up there, like old school, ringing the bells to mark hours of the
steam
day.
Whistles. Yep. True.
And you can tell that by them using metals, which you see a little bit more in episode 3 as well, that metal has a huge amount to do with their culture and their planet, their mindset.
It's probably their entire system of economics is stripping down those ships. We'll hit that in episode 3 because I think that has a nice little tie into Fallen Order, the Xbox game, because that's kind of how that game opens. But in the next scene, Andor is wandering the streets. He does this a lot. It's kind of grating on my nerves. It definitely grates by the end of the episode. We get a look at Nurchi. That's the guy that was trying to shake Andor down for his money, but they don't interact at all. It's basically just Andor walking. It's kind of annoying because it definitely reeks of some of the complaints I have about other shows where it's just walking and looking into the distance, or feelings at tables, feelings in bus rides. I don't know. Do you feel anything different about that?
No, it's pretty much trying to give you the feel of what it's like to live there. That's what they're trying to establish, what the everyday life is. And the easiest way to do it is have your main character or a secondary character walk through the environment so you get a taste of the environment.
It's true.
They took a lot of time. Their art departments, I was looking at it earlier on the IMDb, their art department was huge. So they took a lot of time to build what this is. And the other part that I wanted to point out is that the hair and makeup and the wardrobe were on point to keep it this gritty, dirty, there are no upper class people here. These are all work, I got your back, you got my back type people.
Yep. You can definitely tell, and one of the big sticking points of credit that I'll give them, even in spite of any pacing issues or action scene-y kind of stuff, at its base, I think there's really, 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 really strong production value going on here with these sets. This planet, or at least this town, Ferrix, if that's the name of the colony or the planet, I don't remember.
Yeah, Ferrix.
But wherever they are, it's okay. Wherever they are feels like a real place. You can tell it's a set. It's not green screen in any meaningful way that I can see. It's well populated. There's people everywhere that are kind of, they're at diners, they're at bars, there's foot traffic, there's, small vehicle traffic with people that are on ground-based shuttles and things like that as they're ferried back and forth to wherever they're going. So it reminds me of places I've lived in. If we juxtapose that to things like we've seen on Kenobi and Boba Fett, it's basically like they've got 8 people on retainer, as extras at any given minute, and it just feels empty and kind of not alive at all. And here, every corner he turns, there's live people that are moving in opposite directions going on to what they're doing. Nothing's empty or vacant or abandoned in a way that isn't intentional.
Yeah, and that's why
I feel that completely.
Yeah, and that's why I have a problem with people who say, "Well, he was just a extra." They call them extras. We refer to him as background artists because without them, the world has no life.
Fair enough. That's a really good distinction. I'll try and modify my dialogue for that. That's not bad. Yeah, so I'm feeling them for what they're doing in terms of developing the world. It definitely works for me. Tim and Bix speak briefly. There's attraction there, but she's keeping things casual to one night a week. They were closing up shop, and after they were done with their little exchange about getting together, he kind of checks out what she was doing on the computer monitor, where she had previously been looking up. I think she was looking at the security reports that had come in the night before about mall security being on the lookout for somebody by Cassian's description.
Yeah.
So there's some mistrust brewing there for sure, without a doubt.
You definitely tell that he is a jealous type. He's really happy with his girl, but he doesn't want anyone to come in contact with him at all.
And they've kind of laid it out there too that there's definitely a history, or there's a hinted at history between Bix and Andor that Tim's objecting to, maybe he's going to swing back into her life and fuck things up. So it doesn't surprise me he's a jealous douche.
Yeah, which you definitely have. You'll see later in the same episode when Andor finally goes home.
Yep, true, definitely. And speaking of home, he goes home and we meet Mava. She's an older woman with a long-time connection to Andor that they reveal a little bit more of later. She also has seen the corporate, the mall security APB that's out on Andor. They argue over his birthplace being officially listed as Fest and not Canary because they've always tried to keep his identity under wraps, presumably because of the freighter crash incident from earlier in his life. That was actually a question I wanted to ask you. I'm kind of confused on a sticking point with that entire scene. It doesn't come up until episode 3, so maybe I'll hang on to it until then, but I didn't understand the pressing need for them to evac him from that situation. But just put a pin in that one for me. We'll get to that when we get to episode 3, so we don't throw out the the timeline of this episode, but I don't want to forget that because that's kind of a weird sticking point. Up next, Bix is at a bar. She's knocking a couple drinks back. Andor meets up with her. He tells her what happened with the backstory behind what happened on Morlana. She lets him know that the buyer's on the way because he was, I guess, attempting to back out of the deal. But she's like, it's too late. He's in progress.
So what I got is he wasn't trying to back out of the deal. He was doing like, I will sell it to you, and then you can sell it to him.
Oh yeah,
so
yeah. He was taking less.
He was trying to move
True.
up his. I need to get out of Dodge timeline.
True. Yep, that's a better way to put it. We also see that Big Daddy Tim is watching from the shadows, knocking back a couple drinks of his own, and he does not look thrilled by this rendezvous at all.
Yep, which leads to him getting his liquid courage and answering the call of
makes a little
the corporate, which I have a better understanding of this security. Now, listening to their talking later, is that they are the front line of the Empire. Yep. And if you refer back to Episode 4, New Hope, you didn't talk about, like, he got rid of the governors. But before they got rid of the governors, they had to, control their system. These were the people they used to control their system for the Empire.
Yeah, they became frontline, basically. They became frontline security to ISB in the Empire. I'm still going to call him mall security because of the way he acted in Episode 1. We can roll with that or not. I'm still calling him that because I thought that shit was kind of funny. So speaking of those guys, corporate security is reviewing an anonymous tip linking Andor to the double murders. Gee, wonder who sent in that anonymous tip. They basically cut from Tim looking at the effing monitor to them looking at their monitor on their end, seeing what the info is coming in. But at the same time, they think they're slick because they try to bring in the prostitute from the brothel from Episode 1 while they're reviewing the tip. Like, oh, maybe she was the tip. Maybe she was not the leak, but, the informant. Like, no, dude, we know it was Tim. Like, let's not play around here.
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of a little on the nose, but not awful.
Yeah, they brought her in probably because they were hoping that they would get something to look at a picture and, ID them.
True. That was their motivation. I'm saying in terms of show, that was happening to throw us off from not thinking automatically it was Tim, given the quick cut, I thought, from the previous scene into this one. But kudos to them. That's exactly how show's supposed to work. Keeps things moving like that. Next scene's a quick one. Bix comes by Tim's place unannounced. They spend the night. He's not entirely thrilled to see her, but he lets her stay. She's eager to jump in the sack. Nothing crazy or graphic happens for anybody that hasn't seen it or is wondering. No spoilers here on that. It is a Disney show, but it's probably, in terms of Disney Star Wars, is this as graphic as they've gotten so far? Besides Han and Leia, is this it?
I think so. It was extremely suggestive at the beginning.
Yeah.
And you could definitely tell he's having guilt about turning in one of his own.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that was, you could build the tension, but she wasn't quick enough to pick up on it because she was inebriated at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And she was there trying to smooth over what she saw was a distinction between them two, and it's actually him having problems about what he's about to do to Andor.
Yep, definitely. So they cycle out of that. We go back to corporate security. This is where your boy that we were just talking about, I think it's Sergeant Moss comes in, who seems to be like a corpo super soldier in line with Karn's own particular outlook. He's very rah-rah. He's very down. He's very ordered, disciplined.
Standard NCO.
By the book. There you go. These are guys that you probably know. He's definitely he's well into his probably, what do you think, like 50s, overweight, but he's probably been like that guy. Yeah. Since day one, signing on the dotted line.
Yeah, so he looked like what we would in our modern U.S. military. He'd be what I would look at as a sergeant first class, platoon sergeant. Like he's in charge of a group of about 35 soldiers. Yeah. And he's the NCO in charge. As we said in the Army, if like the officers don't show up to work, the paperwork gets backed up. If the NCOs don't show up to work, the Army shuts down. They're the true backbone of the Army. They're the ones who handle your day-to-day operations. Officers are there to get your paperwork right and do big picture stuff. Your NCO is the one who makes it happen. And that's the type of attitude I got from him, is that he is the guy who makes it happen. Officer gives him
you
a
could
mission,
tell through basically everything that he does throughout the episode is that on the ground boots, like the commanding things that happen that are carried out are decisions that he's basically on board for and he's going to execute no matter what. And also when we get into those scenes later, he's all to your point, he's also the only competent fucking person in this team that I can see. Like, yeah, well, some of the decisions don't end up too well, but at least I think what he was trying to do made sense to me in the moment. You know what I mean?
And I mean, you can label him as a bad guy or as a good guy. He's doing his job at the time.
Right.
He's doing the job that pays him. Even like when we go to war, everyone thinks they're the good guy when you go to war.
Yep.
We see
everybody's the hero in their own story, dude.
Yep.
I'll say this about him too. I was getting, like, immediately once he started talking, I was getting from Aliens, I was getting Apone vibes versus Gorman vibes. Where you get the sergeant that's on the ground, it's like, all right, Marines, let's move, let's go. And then the other guy is just Gorman, who's up there with like his hands folded behind his back, being like a complete douche nozzle by the book. He's trying to be prim and proper, but when the shit hits the fan, Apone's the one that, that they look to. And then when he went down in Aliens, that's when the unit fell apart. Like, that was a complete done deal there. So, what do we got here? I'm just trying to move us along here. Scene 10's a quick one. It's Andor back at the ship he's been kind of hiding out in a little bit. He's retrieving the Star Path unit that he's trying to sell to Bix's buyer. Nothing really goes down here. We just see what he's up to, so he can move the story forward.
Yep.
I'm gonna skip over all the Canary kids stuff because we kind of hit at that at the beginning.
Yeah, just all the Canary background was just them getting from their Alpha group, which their warrior cast, as I was calling them earlier.
Yep.
Getting from point A to point B in their trip to the crash site, and then doing the scouting.
And the girl catching a blast. Yeah.
Was that episode 2 or episode 3 where she caught the blast?
I think it's 2 at the end.
2 at the end.
Because then they're all walking off, carrying her out, and then he's left behind, looking back at the open door of the ship. And then I think it cuts to credits after that. That's the last scene.
Okay, so in episode 3 is where it's the next.
Is when he goes in.
He goes in.
Yes. Yep. So let's, for the sake of just moving things along, nothing really happens except that. So we'll just rip through them. The guy who turns out to be Bix's buyer lands on the outskirts of town. That's Luthen Rail. He very dramatically, for about 15 seconds, looks through his binoculars at the town from a distance. Sees kind of like the landing ferries going in and everything else. Like, that scene it took up a little bit of time. Like, I got the point. I don't mind it as bringing in a new mysterious stranger to town, but I felt like it dragged on a little bit. I appreciate, when we were talking about spycraft the other day, I appreciate this character's discretion in most of the things he does. Like, he's parking away from town by a factor of miles, scoping things out, very intelligent, very cautious. We get more of that in episode 3 for sure, but I saw what they were doing. You know what I mean? I think it was very intentional. They had him land out there, out of the way, and then take a regular bus into town kind of thing.
And, he's the actor himself is no stranger to Disney type. He was in Thor. He was the professor in Thor, and then the main guy, Loki, took over in Avengers, the first Avenger movie.
Mm-hmm. Yep, he was. I don't remember he was the scientist. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. He was Natalie Portman's guy from Thor, right?
Yeah. Sullivan, I think his name is, or Selvig.
Yeah, Selvig.
Selvig. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, but like you said, he's a Skarsgård in real life. We all know that whole family's got acting game, so he's a welcome addition. He lends gravitas to the cast. He commands the screen when he's on there. He's not fucking around. So it works. I'm glad he's there.
It goes with the high level of casting that they've shown throughout this show so far. People who know their craft and know what to do.
Yep, definitely. Next up on the scene list, Bix wakes up in Tim's bed. He's creepily been watching her sleep for a little while. She asks if he's all right. He says he's just tired. She asks for coffee. They kiss. She leaves. Something like that.
He didn't stay up all night.
Saying, you know what I mean? But it kind of shows she's catching on that there's something up with him. So she might be a little slow on that uptake, as we see. But whatever, it is what it is. It's a developmental little scene. It doesn't go on too long. I don't mind it being there. Andor continues to gather gear and comms that he needs to make his escape. He's kind of digging around. He orders EMO to keep quiet to Mava about what he's doing. Kind of goes over kind of quickly there.
Yeah,
the comms thing comes back a little later.
Home to Marva.
Yeah, shoot.
They're reading,
Did that happen already? Did I skip that?
Yeah, it already happened. We already talked about it. But the one part that I wanted to bring up, it just popped in my head. Go. When she had Emo read the announcement, what the mall security sent out looking for their person.
Oh yeah.
And then he was like, he went on and he was just like, Bix sent a message, and he kept trying to get that. Like, what did Bix say? What did Bix say? So you could definitely tell that there's something there that's between them, and that was another scene that just hammered it home.
True. Yeah. When he was telling her, wait. Yeah, but what a bit. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When
I
you
blinked
tell your
over
mom
that.
to be quiet because you want to hear about her girl.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially even when you're like 35, 40 years old, you probably want to pay attention to that scene.
Yeah.
What do we got here? Yeah, he's gathering the gear. Quick scene where that kind of ties into how they ended up getting together. Andor and Mava. She dips down into his bedroom and sees his blowgun, which kicks off one of the flashbacks.
And that is the only time I was actually like the first two, like open up on the flashback was all right. The other flashback had nothing that drove it. This is one of the first times in the series that they had something that drove the flashback, and that was his blowgun.
So you're digging actually having a physical object that tied directly to the other timeline that the show's covering.
It gives you that thing that links the two scenes together. Instead of just a random, like him walking through the street and then cuts to a flash. There was nothing that actually linked it together. So I actually enjoyed this part because it had a physical object that linked it together.
That's a really effective way of grounding people into the story also, and that you're not watching two separate shows at the same time because it's an item that exists in both spaces.
Yeah.
So you're able to put the two together. So yeah, I dig that. That makes a lot of sense. Now, I know this next scene is probably one you're going to like because you've mentioned liking like the spycraft and the network kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But it's the one where Andor is haggling with, I think his name was Zan, over the price of booking discreet passage off of Ferrix. And I dig that because the back and forth was good. There was no major posturing or dick swinging between, there was no implication that there was going to be violence, that there was a deal that was going to be made. Zan was going to get paid. He put his price point out there. Andor kind of haggled him a little bit and got it down a bit. And it's just, in my head, I'm like, you know what? That's how this would have to work. Because if it was in real life, in like a spy resistant situation or something, you need people. You can't do this kind of shit by yourself when you work in black market or gray spaces. If you burn your bridges and your contacts, you die. You have nothing left. There's nothing else for you there.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm betting you dig that. You're probably all about that scene, huh?
Yeah, and the other part that from the technical side of it is that the dialogue was straight solid because there wasn't a useless line. Each line, each part of the dialogue pushed the plot along of what's going on. Not useless dialogue, not useless backstory. It was to the point, get in, get out, like a dialogue scene should be.
Yeah, I hear that. One of the things I'll give them credit on this scene for as well that I think some of these other shows get wrong is, like you were saying about efficiency of the dialogue. I appreciate the efficiency of them knowing that Zan as a character doesn't need a D plot to give me his backstory about how he ended up working at like the transport station and wound up falling into like black market smuggling or trafficking. I don't care. Yet his character works for what it is.
Yet they still had the humor part that was soft and subtle with his co-worker about looking up where...
with the alien. Yes. Yeah, you're right. Yep. True. But see, that's characterization done right, is we get this guy, Zan, who feels like an actual person in the world. He's not one-dimensional where he's just being difficult with Andor about booking the passage. He has interactions with people around him. And we know what even though he doesn't get like an entire plot arc, he had something he wanted. The glass of water that he wanted was money to keep his mouth shut. It was clear, it was concise, it was well executed.
Yep.
So for like a 45-second scene or whatever it was, and I don't have timestamps, but it's nice to see it competently done in this way.
Yeah, not just be an NPC quest giver.
Perfect. Yeah, RPG, exclamation point. Yeah.
Or being someone who's so overblown that you have to have a cut scene for. He serves his purpose, yet he has depth.
Mm-hmm. And as much as I was kind of shitting on the Nurchi character from episode 1, the guy that said Andor owes money to, we could say the same thing about him, and I think you might actually said that, so I'm coming around on that. We don't need the whole backstory of how Andor came into his debt. He just does. He owes him, and that's something that character wants and will be pursuing, at some point, I'm gathering, or not.
Yep.
But hopefully we'll get back to that. Next scene up is Corpo Security is inbound with the full tactical team. They have multiple ships. Moss gives an effective briefing on the tactics they're going to be employing. And then, like we were talking about pre-show, Karn gives a very, very laughable pep talk with some of his guys visibly eye-rolling until Marska starts off the golf clap that kind of builds into this really pathetic, limp-wristed kind of level of applause. It was kind of embarrassing. It was cringe. I had to look away for a minute.
Yeah, and base it on my experience. Like, he's a deputy commander, which he should be higher ranked and more used to this, but apparently I'm getting that he's like an appointee, where his parents had money and bought him the position, because he looks like he has
he's Gorman from Aliens, 100%. No combat drops.
Yeah, so I equivalent him to like a West Point grad who thinks they know everything until they don't. And that's what we saw here.
When it pops
he
off.
thinks he knows everything. He wants
because he knows
this,
the book.
he wants this, but when it's time to, when the rubber meets the road, he's like,
Frozen.
Let's go get justice.
And worse, and we'll talk about that. But I think as we talk about it more, the correlation between these two guys and Gorman and Apone from Aliens is there, because that's the pep talk from Aliens when the Marines are in the bay and Ripley gives her, her insight and everything else. Gorman says some bullshit about I need tactical and this ready by 0500, and then it's Apone that's like, all right, assholes, you heard the man, let's go. And that's what kind of gets in this show gets the golf clap, but in Aliens got the Marines moving.
Yeah, and once again, you see what a good NCO Lucas is by starting the clap. That would, and then come up to him, good speech, sir.
Good speech, sir. True. Yeah, I don't mind them two at all. I don't mind them two. Next scene up, the guy who we end up knowing as Luthen Rail shuttles in. He talks to an old gentleman about the past and how if you can't find what you're looking for here, it's not worth finding. And then we wrap up on Andor, once again moving briskly through the streets with towards the rendezvous point with the parcel, and that ends our episode there. I don't know how I feel about the scene. It was a little bit on the nose about if you can't find what you're looking here. I mean, clearly they're not talking about the Star Path. They're talking about Andor, because I think it was voiceover on Andor while that line was delivered.
Yeah.
But I guess it's a good enough way to wrap it up.
So what that is referred to as an L cut when you're editing. So you have the dialogue from the past scene still going as you get to the action of the new scene.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And you said it's an L cut?
It's referred to as an L cut. You have a J cut and an L cut. The J cut is the exact opposite, going the other way. Like you will see, you have a scene going in, and the sound from the net scene starts. From
what's coming up?
Yeah. And then you cut to it. Good example.
You hear that, boys and girls? We're getting a class here.
A good example of that is in Sherlock, when he's eating dinner and then he goes to the boxing match. Like you start hearing the boxing match while he's still eating his steak. And then you cut to the boxing match of him getting hit.
All right, see, let me apply the lesson learned. So it's also like the end of The Dark Knight, where Gordon is doing his voiceover of the hero we need and all this other stuff, but we hear the bat cycle powering up while he's talking, while Gordon's still talking to his kid in the alley. We hear the bat cycle and the dogs barking as Batman's trucking away, and then we actually get to Batman, and then it's Gordon talking while Batman's jumping on the cycle. See, I can be taught. Yeah. I can be taught. That's what I'm talking about. Nicely done, dude.
Yeah, and then the
take
shot
a quick
itself,
go ahead.
The shot itself was, we call it artistic fodder. It was the whole purpose is just to be an artistic shot. They probably used a dolly and pulled back. Had about 12 feet of track to pull back on the dolly to get that shot, to get the whole background, and just to cement the scene.
Yeah, it's really well done. This show, like you were talking about on the craft level, even just on my layman's understanding of it, it feels like something older than it is. It feels like something that might have been made in 2000 because it's solidly done, it's competently done. They spared what seems like no expense on like the foundation of the world they're trying to build. And I think that like when we talk about in writing terms about setup and payoff, and too often some of these shorter shows, the trap they fall into is assuming they've earned the payoff just by showing up. And that you couldn't be further from the truth on that. You have to put in the wrench time or you can't claim the payoff later. You can't.
And here's something else. Like the look of this show looks like it has a $60-70 million per episode budget. Like Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings looks amazing because they spent so much money on it. This one has half its budget, average of 15 to 20 million per episode, and they're still pulling off this amazing cinematic look.
Yeah, true that. I'd argue that Rings of Power, when you actually get into it, you can see where they spent the money on some of the establishing shots on the larger cityscapes and things like that. But if you ever get around to watching it, you'll see it. You were talking about wardrobe and hair and makeup earlier on in the show tonight. It's garbage on that show, guy. We're talking about 3D printed, drop printed T-shirts that have scale mail printed on it, and that's the armor. Yeah, no, it's trash. We'll cut that out, and then when we leave this part in, though, we're gonna take a quick break so Kingsley and I can refuel, and we'll be right back.
What's going to happen in this episode? It sets you up from get-go. Now, this is what I would call a redliner show. It gets you up and it keeps you there till the end.
Yeah, definitely. We were just talking about that on the break. That's absolutely right. Because as I was telling you before you started watching, episode 3 is where business picks up, and when it picks up, business booms for a while in terms of pacing and story. But we're going to do this real quick because there's not a lot. Believe it or not, guys, we had about 20 some odd scenes, episode 1 and episode 2. There's not a lot to break down here because it really is one continuous sequence of events once you get to the beginning of the end. So we're going to jump right into just a quick breakdown of everything that came before that, because it's not much. But it is some interesting character backstory. As we see here, we have Andor in flashback. He's on Kenari. His group leader has been wounded, presumably killed or mortally wounded. The kids take her back to camp, but he decides to go into the down ship by himself. Ballsy move or dumb as fuck? Your call.
I think it was a prove it moment. Like, as you could tell, if you looked at the group of kids, you can definitely tell he's the youngest of the group of alphas that are doing the scouting party.
Yep. And the one kid didn't even want him to go.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right.
And then he saw the person he looked up to, because if you go back to the very first scene where he saw her and he started putting the face paint on because of her get killed, he wanted his revenge. Anger took over at this point.
Oh yeah, definitely, because we see that a short distance in, where he's poking bodies to be cautious, because there must have been like a bio leak or something, gas. So it can't be anything viral because they're cooked and they're all yellow. Like something awful happened in there.
So you do have a hint of what happened both in episode 1 and later in this episode. When you see,
what did I miss?
When you see the Republic ship coming in, crashing, you see yellow smoke coming out of one of the holes. That is a biological bomb that went off inside of it. That's why they had the mask on. You see them all have like a gas mask type thing on.
Yes.
And then later you see the, I won't give it away until we get to it, but they come in and they're like, they said it will only last 20 minutes.
Oh, true. I must have just zoned right out of that. You're right. Good ear, dude. Good ear. So to your point a few minutes ago, Andor gets in the ship. He's checking things out. He's poking bodies because they're grotesque and, orange shade of jaundice or whatever's going on there. He finds his way into probably something that looks like maybe a bridge or a control room of sorts. But the interesting part about this scene, and we had talked about this last week and off camera, is they play it out like he's never seen technology before, because he sees his own reflection for the first time in like glass and starts going ape shit crazy and starts smashing on things. Like he's completely bewildered by his surroundings, which we thought was odd in the first episode because, as you can see, he's wearing mass-produced textiles. He had actual boots on his feet, but they're basically carrying around spears and, doing the Planet of the Apes Hunger Games thing. So are they stranded kids from a civilized world? Did they steal technology and they were really just primitives living on Kenari? What do you think's going on here?
So we go back to the conversation where he's trying to pay for passage, and he's talking. And he was like, they were talking about the planet. Like, have you ever heard of Kenari? And they said that, I believe it was a site of a imperial, it was a republic at the time, industrial accident. Yeah. So they might be the kids of the people who were working that mine. So they have the clothes and everything. So they've never seen it because the accident happened. They sheltered to like the kids in place. Why all the adults were killed because they all worked in that mining that we saw in episode 2, that huge area that looked like the battle. The battle area from Attack of the Clones.
Attack of the Clones. Interesting. Good point. I hadn't put those two together. That's a good thought. I hope they pay this off later, because after episode 4, it looks like they've resolved most of the flashback to this point, but I could be wrong. And God only knows what they're going to work in later. But that's good points on that, on the backstory for him. So he starts going a little ham. Next scene forward, we get more establishing stuff of the shipyard that Brasso kind of works at. They get that one really cool shot where there's a big piece of ship being lowered, and there's guys standing on it like while they're working. And this, I don't know if you played it, I don't remember if you ever mentioned it, but Fallen Order basically starts with this scene, where it's guys that are stripping down the hull from like an old Republic cruiser or a Star Destroyer, and that's where your guy realizes he's got force powers and he saves his part and he's got to go on the run. But I wasn't sure if this was a tie into that. And I was like, oh, I wonder who. Maybe, you never know. But it was interesting imagery anyway. We see Brasso's on the job site. I think this is where Andor comes up and basically tells him, I'm out. I got to take off. Mava's going to have the money I owe you. Thanks for looking out. And I'll try to get back at some point. So not a lot going on. It was nice to see people acting like people. They're saying goodbyes. It's a stressful situation for Andor. Brasso knows that his ne'er-do-well black sheep friend is probably going to go get himself killed in the next 10 seconds. I was digging that. Thoughts? What do you got? Anything?
Yeah, it was a closing of a chapter is what how I see Andor sees this. This is a closing of a chapter, time to move on, in which we will see that in the symmetry throughout this episode of he got to point as far as he could in this story, and now it's time for him to move to his next chapter.
That's a good point. It's a really good point. And it's actually a really effective point of no return, actually. And it didn't require anybody, burning Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru or anything like that, but we'll cover that when we get there. But it's definitely a point of no return. So that's a quick conversation there. I think we get a little bit more of Luthen Rail on his way in, but this is where Luthen Rail meets Bix. They're walking through. She's talking about, we tried to tell you the window was closing. I almost missed it. He asks about Andor, and it's interesting. She says, can you trust him? And she just says, he'll be there. She doesn't specifically say, I trust him. But when they're talking about Andor making the meeting, she says he'll be there. So he's vouching, but was she really totally vouching, or was she withholding a little bit? I don't know. I thought it was pretty gray.
It's a very ambiguous statement because, one, she knows he wants the money, and that's pretty much the driving force here. So he will be there because he wants the money. Yeah. Can we trust him? That's a whole nother story.
True. But I like, and again, to speak to the craft that the spy craft we're always talking about, they walk in, she's a little anxious, a little uppity. He tells her to calmly tell her what's going on. She does. They walk, they have their little chat, and right at the end of the frame when they're asking about can we trust him, they kind of go their separate ways around like a little ferry thing that's in the road, like they weren't even walking and talking together. They just kind of they kind of divert out, and I'm like, that's some shit you'd see in like 1960s like Cold War movies. Like that's some James Bond shit.
Yeah, you have just the intelligently done. Where it just looks like you're just two people walking down the street, exchanging pleasure trees.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, it's like they don't stay, and this is where they do the smart thing that I don't remember if they didn't do it, but I feel like in other shows there would have been a scene or a shot within this where they stop and look at each other and say the most obvious on the nose thing. And I'm like, dude, if I was security and I was, on the lookout for some suspicious shit, people stopping in the middle of a street and abruptly talking angrily at each other would be something I'd want to go look at.
No,
but they didn't.
It has to be a walk and talk. That way it just looks like...
Yep.
Now, there was a little bit of where she messed up, and you can see that, like, because he looked at her. You can see the look in his eyes where she ran up to him to say something.
Yep. Right at the beginning, and that's when he says, calmly. Yeah. And he kind of puts her in check, because again, it's the network. The network's more important than any single piece, but it needs every single piece to be effective and persistent in their mission. So,
and it leads.
I like that. I like what was going on there
overall in the story, which we'll get to that towards the end.
Yep, true. I'm trying to advance the line. That's Bix going separate. We get a quick shot of just the corporate security doing their inbound kind of stuff. It was a cool shot where the three ships are in formation, breaking atmosphere, I think. Mm-hmm. But there wasn't anything really worth breaking down in there. We get another flashback real quick. It's where Mava actually meets with her husband. I think his name was Clem, where they meet Andor on the bridge of the ship.
Yep.
This is the sticking point I was talking about earlier in the show here, is they're concerned about him being found there. I'm concerned about why, if this is still a republic. I mean, it's an Empire ship at this point, right? Because, I mean, it's the Empire. So they'd kill this kid on sight. Like, they don't trust him to run away on his own. Like, they had to take him with them.
Well, this is still Republic time. Okay, so if you go back to episode 1, it points out, and it's the first time Star Wars has used this as canon. They had BBY-5 before Battle of Yavin 5. It's the first time they've ever used it. So you're thinking Andor's maybe...
I think did Rogue One use it?
No, Rogue One did not use it. It is the first time they used it. Was
the first time they marked the timeline on screen. Cool.
Yep.
Very cool. Good pickup.
So when you go back to him being a kid, you're thinking this is maybe 25 years, maybe 20 years. He might be 25, between 25 and 30. So anywhere between, and he's about what I'd say 11 to 12 as the flashback.
No more than 13. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're looking at 13 to 18 year time frame here before the events of the show Andor.
True.
So it would be Republic. It wouldn't be Empire yet. It would still be Republic. It would still be the old Republic.
See, how does that add up, though, if ISB shows up in the next episode and Corpo Security's already working for them? Or were they already just part of that Republic infrastructure as they're being converted into the Empire? Because this must have... Yeah, because episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, happened years before this.
Yeah.
So they're already kind of on their way into that decline.
Yep.
Okay.
Because, they had the whole voting to become an empire in Revenge of the Sith.
Oh, yeah, you're right. And that's why in episode 4 he goes, the last vestiges have been swept away of the old Republic. That's what Tarkin says in the board meeting. Okay, yeah, you're right. So it's still technically the Republic, but it's trash at this point.
So he would...
And that's why Mon Mothma and the Resistance is rising.
Yep, and then you see that he has the blow gun, and they killed a Republic officer with the blow gun. So he's going to be linked to it. So that's why they were worried about him.
Yeah, that's right. And that dude is all kinds of covered in darts outside in the mud. Good point, because they hosed him with poison darts.
Yeah, they did.
Some sick shit. Yeah, they did.
And then,
all right, so Marva's looking good. Yeah, good. Go.
Yeah, and then you did see that she became instantly interested in the kid right off the bat. Mm-hmm. So, and that they're there because you hear that they're talking about the chemical bomb I brought up earlier, that it should burn off. Take your mask off. I can't hear you type thing. We see a emo. Pretty much new at that point. Like he's
that's him. That's him in perfect working order. Yep.
Yeah. So and they're there seeing what they can salvage from the ship. So you can tell that they're scavengers from Ferrats, like maybe an underground type.
The husband makes a remark about we're already carrying too much already, yada yada, and then when they go rolling out of scene, when they finally take him, like the emo unit's dragging like a sled worth of salvage.
Yeah. So what I'm taking from this is Marva and her husband is Andor's first mentor, who turned him into what he is now, the thief that gets things to sell off.
Smuggler,
because
scavenger.
That's their already life. That was their life.
Yep.
And
makes sense.
That's why I'm like this whole episode is a flipping of the page. If you go into the last few cutscenes at the very end, how it keeps going back, how his life changed at that moment when they picked him up to the end of this episode where he's flying off another planet. So it's like his new mentor.
Yeah. True. Actually, that's a really good point. Is it does kind of mirror the life track that he's taking. One of the things I like about the entire sequence is that most of the time when we get flashbacks, it's pointless filler because they don't know how to fill screen time. And I feel like in this case so far, everything they've done in the flashback has told me something, at least, even if it's not germane to the story, into Andor's story now. It's an interesting look into how he became, to your point, the guy he is now. And it's interesting is that he was picked up and adopted, rescued essentially, like you said, by smugglers or by salvagers, the people that could have left him for dead but didn't. So they got a little bit of that. They got a good-hearted, like good-natured vibe. Like they're benevolent when they didn't have to be. They could have just taken the payoff and gone, or the payload and gone, but they didn't. They took a kid with them and out of harm's way. So it's interesting character work they do for them, and not for Andor only, just for Mava, who is now an intricate part of his life, who he's having to leave behind as he exits through this point of no return in the story by the end of this episode. So good use of flashbacks, writers of Andor, very well done. Next up, and this is where we kind of roll into like the entire last act of things and everything that kind of pops off here, is corporate security, I think, hits the ground. We get, a couple of quick scenes of both of those guys, Karn and Mosk, having their little back and forth about what are we going to do and this and that and how they're going to deploy the resources they brought. But interestingly
Which was a good
enough,
battle plan, by the way. It was a great battle plan that they had set up.
Yep. He said, but no good plan survives the first shot, though. You know what I mean? And that's essentially what happens here, is that they get themselves into position. There you go. Yep. But interestingly here, and again, I get vibes from everything that happens here. I feel like if we asked guys that have spent time overseas in the desert recently in some of these conflicts, that they would have experienced some of these feelings that are coming up here. Is as Corpo Security's kind of walking through like they own the joint, we get a bunch of people giving them the stink eye. The guys that are working at the shipyard kind of stop what they're doing. They look up at them. They kind of give them the cross eye, and then they kind of just get back to work. But nobody takes any overt action. We don't get any hints that they're armed and going to do anything stupid or anything like that. But it's tense. It's palpably tense, and all they've done is walked in.
Yeah.
Like and even Corpo Security hasn't done anything stupid yet.
Yeah.
They haven't raised up guns and done anything like that. So from here, this is, like I was saying earlier, the business really, really picks up because Corpo Security finds their way to Mava's house.
Yep.
They must have got that on the tip from Tim, as we figured earlier.
Yep.
She's got a set of brass ones on her and basically stonewalls and was like, nah, I don't know nothing.
Even tried to close the door on them. She even tried to close the door.
Yeah, she did. Yep. And I was getting vibes here. Like this isn't like real world American politics stuff here on this show. This, like, when we get like real time dramas here in the States, it's usually the door gets slammed and then the police need to leave and go through the warrant thing and they make their jokes on the way out of shot and everything else. This gave me like Hunger Games. They're dealing with like the Capitol vibe, like comply or die, and in the strictest, bang the bullets kind of analogy that I can make, because they just basically hold that door right open and they just roll in. They're searching the joint, they're wrecking the joint up. She's not saying anything. Karn's trying to talk some smack. It's not working. So yeah, Mava's got some brass ones on her. So she's probably been through this a couple of times, given her her occupation, things like that.
Yep.
But it's cool because it's useful character development for her, is that we know she's not going to dime him out, that there is like a code of conduct. There's some honor amongst thieves probably, where it's like, Andor? Who? I don't know.
It's also like what your mom would do if the cops came.
Yes, I suppose in a more Disney G-rated level, yes, your mom should never dime you out unless actually you murdered somebody, which he did. So I don't know. I don't know if Mama Winterwolf would actually hold the line on a double murder. I don't know.
When Possible. Your mom's a criminal herself, a smuggler.
Yeah, see, so the code. Yeah, the code probably applies differently. So where it all goes wrong is dipshit Andor on remote calls into B2EMO, asking about Mava. Don't tell Mava, or don't tell Bix, whoever he's talking about. Yeah, let's say it was an apology. That's right, because he's leaving.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, Karn hears this. This is where it all gets ugly. Because does he give up where he is, or do they trace the location or something? How do they know where to go?
He uses a device to triangulate the signal.
Oh, that's okay, right. So Karn takes most of his guys. He leaves a couple of people at Mava's place, but he's rolling out full force, just about to go to the warehouse and intercept Andor before he can sell the Starpath unit. So the second to last big thing that happens is basically Andor meeting Luthen Rail at the warehouse.
Well, you also have to remember the underground as well, because he starts running around telling people like, hey, these guys just landed. Yeah. And that's where Bix finds out what Tim does. Yep. And then that changes Tim's mindset. Like, he's like, I need to make it up to her type thing.
Yeah, I totally blew over that. Good catch. Because that actually, as we know, that's going to come up in a couple of minutes about what the impact of the decisions you make have unintended consequences, so to say. So, but I think the big thing that comes down here, we're talking about entering next chapters of life, is Andor gets into the kind of a bit of a standoff in the warehouse with Luthen Rail. They do the whole, I've got the goods, you got the money. Well, how do I know you've got the goods? Well, how do I know you've got the money? They kind of get into that for a couple of minutes. It drags on a little bit, but the performances are so on point, though. I'm not bored watching them have the exchange. So it's kind of cool to see two distinct characters with two very different personalities having this exchange where Luthen Rail, as the head, as who we assume is one of the heads of the network, him and Mon Mothma. We all knew that. It's not we're spoiling things anyway.
No.
But he's got to be the calm, cool, collected, calculating, 5 moves ahead, never trapped into a corner guy. This is who he needs to be. And Andor is the impulsive thief smuggler guy that needs to get out of Dodge now.
Yeah. And you could definitely tell that he had another agenda altogether showing up there. It wasn't about the bots, because if you listen to his questions, it has nothing to do with the actual merchandise that he's trying to sell him.
Yeah. Right. And they do they spell it out for you after they do that. Like, because he actually has a line where he's like, I came out here for you. Basically, I think that's a line that comes up near the end, right before it hits the fan. Yep. But the exchange going back and forth is he's basically feeling him out and vetting him into like, you can keep doing this kind of shit, or you could come with me and we could really hit him where it hurts.
Yeah, and what triggers that to speed up is they start hearing the alarm of the people running around. Then they start banging on metal when they leave Marva's house. Like, what are you doing with Marva? What you doing with Marva? And then he ran, and they started banging metal. And then everyone started banging metal. And that's when we see Brasso see there, and he looks.
And you saw it. Yep. And that ties into one of the scenes that I was gonna skip over because it happens kind of quick, and the outcome of that happens. But again, it's funny how everything falls into place, because the guy that gets it from Brasso is the guy that handles the Tim's unintended consequences. We'll hit that in a minute.
Yeah.
But to the point of the bells ringing, I thought the best part of that comes a little bit later, where Karn, it wasn't Karn, it was the officer left behind, or the soldier left behind. He goes, "What does it mean?" And Marva just dead ass looks at him and goes, "It's a reckoning." And I'm like, "Oh shit, dude, Star Wars is about to get dirty." And then it does.
And then she goes and scares him even more, to the point where they leave. It's like, you need to worry about when it stops.
Yep, dude, it was ice, dude. It was ice cold water in her veins, without a doubt. But it's good. And again, I know I've seen this actress in things before. I don't know who she is, but I know she's been in stuff I've seen. She has to have been. She's very recognizable. And again, she didn't look like she was much in the first scene. She looked like an older lady that was kind of probably sitting at home. Maybe she was on hospice or something, and she was kind of frail and everything. But then they wisely give us the flashback where they kind of make up or VFX her down a little bit in age to make her a little bit more young, a little bit more virile, and she's carrying a gun in a back, and she's doing some smuggler shit. That way, when this scene comes up later and she's stonewalling security officers and basically telling them, dude, it's a reckoning, your time is up. You buy it from her because you know who she is.
Yep.
You know what she is. She's not just some crocheting grandma in a chair that's like, oh shit, you done it now. Like, no, this is probably somebody that knows your ass is handed coming, like, real quick.
So do you want to know where you know her from?
Where do I know her from, dude? I'm going to be like, of course.
She's Harry Potter's aunt.
Aunt Petunia. I thought she had that beakish thing going on. And see, again, I hate that character in that franchise because she's so despicable, but the actress sold it.
Yeah.
Good shit. You know what I mean? She was a miserable sea-bag in every movie she was in, but the actress sold it. It worked. So here, I buy it. She's got some presence in these scenes, but they very wisely kind of baked it into the DNA of who she was. I'm concerned about Andor. Oh, I'm rescuing Andor. I've got guns and I'm a salvage. I'm a smuggler, and I'm a pilot because she's piloting the ship when they bail, when they rescue him and shit. So we know she's competent and tough and kind of a badass. And I'm looking at you, other Disney females. This is how you do it. She didn't have to shit on anybody around her to be this character.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? She was acting as a protagonist. She had the one quip to her husband about, "I'll just take your mask off, we're going to be fine." But, like, she didn't order him about to go do anything while she got all the glory or anything like that. Sidebar, we're not getting distracted on that in this episode, though. But, moving it forward, so the reckoning is underway. We slip back to Bix. She's putting the word out. She has, like, a real quick bit with Tim. I think this is where, I'm just looking at stills. The freeze frame I have here is terrifying with her bug-eyed. I think this is where he mentions that he dimed Andor out, like that it was definitely him.
Yeah.
And she's like, "How could you? He's one of us," I think was the line. And then he's got to make some decisions about what he's going to do to rectify that.
Yeah.
What else do we got
then
here?
that leads with her
go ahead.
running with the security,
Yep.
where they're like, "Oh, you look scared. Get over here!" And they pin her down.
So yeah, we get more of Andor and Luthen Rail in the warehouse. I'm going to skip over that because they're basically just still doing the cat and mouse thing. Andor draws on him, and I think he's basically asking him, like, who are you really? They get into the deeper level of questioning about why I'm here. I'm actually here for you. I could probably get a hold of a Star Path unit whenever I wanted, but I needed you.
Yeah, and he wanted to know
You know
how
what I mean?
he got it. And that's where Andor's like, they don't expect us to walk on their floor.
Yep. Yeah, look like they look, to come in their house, steal their shit, spit in their food, whatever.
Yeah.
We get a quick clip. It's the younger kid that's running around basically putting out the town alert. We see all the people stepping out and starting to bang on the metal pipes, like, the wind chimes and anything that's metal that's that's hanging outside of every door. So this is like a community alarm that they have, and it's in the open. So they probably use this for fires and whatever else.
Yeah.
Like, it's nothing that they had to hide. So this isn't part of the craft. This is just some useful shit that they're like, oh no, ding, 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 ding. And then it
goes back into their culture,
the number of rings,
what they do.
Yep. I'm betting the number of rings is the reckoning ring, though. You know what I mean? Like, fire's probably like 2 or whatever. 4 or 5 or whatever it is here. It's probably like, no, we're going to scare the shit out of these mall security guys. Let me just advance it quick, because I think that a lot of stuff happens in the warehouse before mall security shows up. Like, a lot. Like, there's a lot of back and forth.
There's a lot of back and forth between them building.
Yeah.
Pretty much getting into Andor's head of what he can be. Once again, it's potential of what he's capable of and what this guy's looking for. As I refer to him as, he's the Nets mentor. Like, Marva took him to this point. This is the guy who's going to take him to the Nets level.
Rail's taking over.
If you want to equivalent, it is the Gandalf character who's teaching the hobbits what they can be.
Yep. Dude, apt analogy. We get into, which pretty much the last like 10 or 15 minutes, however long this runs, is basically everything that happens when corporate security shows up, I think, at the warehouse. And one of the interesting bits that comes up there that gives you even more insight without being on the nose or being too much exposition is Luthen Rail is basically asking Andor, do you know how to get out of here? Always have a second exit. You have to plan your exit before you get there. Whatever he says, he's basically laying it down that he is the spy master of this group. Like, he knows the game. And he's going to impart upon Andor, who already has acquired some black market skills and being able to, get in and get out kind of thing. But he's going to teach him how to think. He's not going to teach him what to do. Yeah. And I think that's going to be interesting when it goes forward.
Yeah, I think the line was, you build your exit when you're going in.
Yep. True. Yep, that's exactly what I was talking about. And you can see that, and then Andor's got to do his quick scribble think. He's like looking around, it's like, oh, we're going to go out this way through the furnace or whatever he says like that. And after they get into the that actually happens after they're shooting at that point in there? I don't remember. I might have skipped too far ahead on the freeze frame.
Yeah, I think after the explosion. No, because he hinted that he had explosions, and then it cut to Bix.
Yes, he planted them on the way in because he seals the main door that he came behind. That's right.
And then
but then they get into the shootout with the guys that are up top, and they make it out through the furnace.
Yeah,
and
but
then
before
this slides
they get to
into
that, they have
go.
They have the second Bix scene where she tries to escape, and then they slam her against the wall, and that's where Tim comes in, and that was the very first shot fired. Was when Tim charged to help her, and then the rookie
let's talk
shoots him
about
down.
that. Let's talk about that, because I think this is kind of hilarious, but it also it's well thought out in how it goes down and how there's an effect to every cause. I mean, there's always that principle at play here, and the way that works in this particular scene here is that I don't remember the actor's name. Who's in charge of that smaller unit? The African American guy. That they might not even have named his character, but he's basically like the corporal leading that smaller group. Like, he's
we refer to him as the fire team leader.
Okay, so that's good enough for you. So fire team leader here sees Bix running, orders her to stop, and I'm like, all right, well, there's lots of people running, but he's picked her out of the crowd and be like, doesn't look like you're running home. I'm like, all right, I mean, whatever, the plot needs to happen. So I kind of stick on that a little bit, but he basically he takes her into custody. Right?
Yep.
They kind of rough with her a little bit. They chain her up on the wall. Of course, Tim's dumbass comes down the stairs at the exact second to see this. He sees her bleeding from the head because they roughed her up a little bit. And he's like, which one of you dipshits did this? And fire team leader draws his sidearm and he's like, no, I told you to stop. Like, you're going to want to freeze there. There's going to be some shit. And then Tim looks at her again and very predictably just like full dash attacks down the stairs towards the group. And dipshit squad member raises the rifle and plugs him in the chest and puts him down.
Yep.
Right? Fire team leader knows this was the dumbest effing decision anybody's ever made in the history of mall security, because he basically takes his gun and says, go back to the ship and get it in the air. We need recon or whatever we need.
Yeah.
And that sets up the next little interesting bit of stuff that happens in terms of this all going to shit. Corporate security that's still kind of in the middle of figuring out what to do with the warehouse, because everything over there has fallen apart for some reason. They think they're under siege from like 47 different angles, despite shots only being fired from one way, but they think they're surrounded because of the ringing of all the metal. Like, they think that there's like 5,000 insurgents coming their way, and they're starting to fall apart. Like, their comms are getting kind of screaming at each other. It's starting to getting a little tense. And, you know, you can see Mosk at this point is kind of running the frame I have up here. We'll have to figure out a way to sync these so you can see what I'm talking about in real time. But Mosk is basically on the radio. He's like, you know, you got to, team A or, East team, do this, do that. But Karn is in the background, standing like jaw slacked. He's just like looking around. He doesn't have any idea what's going on.
Nope.
He's taken no action of it by himself at all yet. He's given no orders at all. He's in for some shit.
Yeah, you can see that, they called for everyone to surround the warehouse where they're at, because they have his location. And then everything started falling apart when they broke containment. Plus, they didn't expect to have a spy master against them. And then there's just the common fear, which, if you, for anyone who's watching this, ever walked a patrol in Iraq, that's kind of what they were going through. When you're walking those streets, especially early in the Iraq War, it was extremely scary for all of them, because you don't know who's friend or foe. There were military-age people all around, and that's how we refer to them, military-age male. So
they're breaking down here at this point, without a single shot fired from outside at all.
And then they're the ones who made the mistake of firing first, because now you open Pandora's box at that point.
Well, they painted targets on everybody in a uniform there at that point. So the next interesting thing that happens in the middle of this siege gone wrong is Karn splits off from the group. I don't remember why he split off. Like, he was going one way, the other guys went the other way. Like, they were splitting up to more surround the warehouse or something.
Yeah.
But he gets captured like a dickhead.
So we got back to the warehouse, and that's when they exploded. He blew his charges, which took out like 2 of the security guys. Then they had the firing from the top. And they're going back and forth to try to. Well, Andor makes the rookie mistake of wanting to go back for the box, because he thinks that's the most important. And Rail was like, "The box isn't important. You're the part that's important, because you're the one I'm going to need." Yeah. And so,
let me stop you right there, just because I want to point out, just in that scene of Andor trying to go back, Rail saves him like 35 fucking times from like chains and shit coming down from like the ceiling and this and that, but Andor also bumps him out of the way of a couple of things, if I remember right. So there's this, it's not reciprocity, but it's the 2 guys that haven't come to a deal yet, knowing they have a common enemy by mall security, and they are working together to get out. And I like that, because I feel like that's missing in so much fiction, especially current day, is we, again, like I said before, we would just get into this pissing contest about who's in charge or who's right, or, the old guy can't be right, but the young guy doesn't know anything. And these 2 dudes are like, these guys are all shooting at us. We should probably get the fuck out of here and make sure we both get out.
Yeah.
So go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you, but I just want to throw that in.
He's throwing down covering fire. He's trying to get him, and then he realizes. I don't know when Andor actually realizes that getting the box is futile, and the other guy's like, "We just gotta get out." And then they broke containment because they had the furnace that put them out on the other side of the warehouse, where they didn't have everyone in place yet to secure the full perimeter of the warehouse. And that's when they radio in, like, "Oh, they're gonna come right towards us." So they were setting up an ambush point to take them down.
They're in the ambush. I think the moment Andor knew, if I remember right, and this shit got a little hectic on the inside for you guys that haven't seen the episode, like when the shots actually start coming down, the warehouse basically becomes like a giant dust bowl. There's like chains and industrial debris that just comes swinging down like Indiana Jones style, just like crashing shit and breaking shit up. But I think the box gets destroyed. I think something fell on it or cut him off from it or from getting direct access.
Yeah, I think he got cut off from it.
There's no way he could have got. Yeah.
Yep, and then the whole
so I think
then the whole
that's
thing
when he finally
came
decided.
down.
True. So that's all happening, all very exciting. And then Karn's dumbass goes ahead and gets himself captured. Wait, did I skip too far ahead there?
No.
Oh, no, because coming up next, we get the scene where we mentioned where Maver tells the kid about the reckoning.
Yep.
That's a thing. Mosk is outside. I'm just skipping down the timeline. Oh, no, yeah, we're coming right up on it. So basically, somehow Andor and Karn end up in the same building on the escape path, right? Andor gets the total drop on him, disarms him, basically scares the shit out of him, and like leaves him restrained on the ground. Doesn't kill him, leaves him restrained on the ground and makes his exit.
Mm-hmm. Even though with Rail in the background telling him to kill him.
Right. Oh yeah, that's right. He was right over his shoulder. So there's decisions made there that are, again, going to have some unintended consequences. And I'll bet you lunch, and I will DoorDash since you're out of state, I will bet you lunch that at some point Karn kills Rail. And that would be the unintended consequence that puts Andor squarely on the path of Resistance fighter ship.
Yeah, I could see that happening.
You know what I'm saying? So maybe a DoorDash isn't in order for this one, but I think that is the setup here because I think the show, even though it's doing well and I'm enjoying what I'm seeing, I think there are going to be elements of predictability here because they're trying to play certain things safe. So I don't think we're going to get a full-on Game of Thrones political intrigue, backstabbery that you never see coming like the Red Wedding. I think some of these things are going to kind of follow that kind of progression. So that was the first thing that jumped out at me when he didn't kill him.
Yeah, definitely.
What do we got here? The escape is on. I don't think somebody else finds Mosk. I don't think it's somebody else finds Karn. I don't think it's Mosk. He basically unties him, gets him up and out. We get the cut scene where the guy that the fire team leader had to dismiss and get the ship ready. Cool shit happens to him as he's running to the ship and getting it airborne. You want to tell us what happens to that poor son of a bitch?
Yep. So you see earlier that Brasso was walking away from the area of the ship because it landed near where he was recovering an old Republic ship, and you just see him walking away like you know something went down. And then we see the fruits of his labor where he tied it to a heavy piece of ship wreckage that got caught around a high rise that caused the ship to explode, which also confused the other people because they're like, well, maybe that's them. Then it's like, then they got behind us.
They're behind us. Yep. And see, this is what I'm talking about with this show, is that they could have just had him get the ship, Brasso's Andor's friend, so we knew he intervened somehow. He planted a bomb. I didn't expect to tie it off. That's exactly what he could have done. Like, he wouldn't have had explosives or known how to rig them. Oh, I guess they might have blasted. They made up blasting charges and things. But he did something creative and intuitive that's in line with his line of work that had an impact on the plot. But they wisely tied in so the consequence there is that the guy shot Tim. He had to be the guy to get the ship up. That's a consequence.
Yep.
And then the consequence of that is it further scares everybody on the ground, like you said, and it just creates that kind of confusion that you see and you know from other war type movies and also sadly real life experiences. Like, you're already shooting this way. A fucking bomb or something exploding behind you is terrifying at that point. So it made sense. It's not just that the ship crashed and that they wasted the moment, like it crashed down into the salvage yard. It crashed into something high enough that everybody else on the ground could see, and then they all realized that like comms are dead from the recon ship and we're boned. Like, this was one of our ways out of here. We're in some shit now.
Yeah, and it's also it feeds into their confusion. So they don't know how it went down. They don't know that it was tied off and that it got tangled. They just know something made their ship destroyed. And now they're thinking they might have more weapons than they do. It's a great... it feeds into their fear and their confusion at the time of the attack.
Yeah, and some of those guys on the ground might have actually seen specifically that it was their shuttle that ended up going into I think it was like the back end of like the back end of her cruiser that they were taking apart. I don't think it was a building. I think it was salvage, I think. But it was big and it was tall. So if you're on the ground and you happen to be facing that way, you might not have seen that it was anchored by some chain to wreckage. You might have only literally just seen the last second of boom, like, shuttle into the side of something. It's terrifying. You don't know what the fuck's going on. No idea what's going on over there. So we get that. Andor, I believe. I'm just skipping right to the end here. Yep, because I'm going to end up on Karn here. Basically, Andor and Rail make their escape. They hijack. It's one of their Corpo security transports, I think, and they kind of run it right at their blockade that they have set up.
So they were in a garage.
That way they get out Corpo security shooting it.
It looked like
they're in a garage.
Yep. And they're like,
but they send out.
Yeah, and he sees the carrier there, and he's like, "How many more of those explosives do you have?" So he had something in mind, where they sent that out, and it got taken down. People circled around. I mean, it was predictable what was going to happen. I mean,
of course. But I'd like to point out real quick, it was Andor's idea to rig it, though, because he was the one that asked how many explosives were left.
Yep.
So we can see here that he's already thinking like Rail was trying to teach him. We're building the exit before we're trying to get over there. So he was creative enough to that end, because at this point, we know Cassian Andor is basically like a smuggler, a salvage guy. We don't necessarily know that he has any kind of inclination toward any black ops kind of techniques, guerrilla techniques, anything like that. We get a hint of what he's about in episode 4, but I'm going to save that because you haven't seen it yet. They do lay in a little bit of that, because I think it's in episode 4 where Rail kind of strips bare some of Andor's backstory. I don't think it happened here, did it? Where they're talking about, I spent 2 years in...
No.
Okay, that's all I'm saying. Okay, I'm stopping there. So basically, get us back to the blockade. They rigged the transport thingy. What happens?
So they shoot that out, and one thing I want to point out with what we just said, it proves that he could think on his feet, which we know he becomes a spy. We've seen Rogue One.
Yep.
So this proves that, when you're in that line of work, you have to think quick on your feet, because nothing stays to plan. Murphy
Using
has
things on hand. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So he's thinking on his feet already of what he needs to do. Yep. So they send it out. The ambush worked. I mean, it was a great ambush where they took down the carrier and started surrounding it as they should. Karn gets cut out, and he comes out again as they take off on the speeder bike the other direction. They lay down a couple blaster...
Andor and Rail take off in the other direction, right?
Yep. And they lay down some cover fires. They go just to make sure that no one gets a clean shot on them, but it's a speeder bike. Yep. You're not going to get a clean shot on a speeder bike. It's like shooting a motorcycle. You're not going to get a clean shot.
Incidentally, on that, dude, love one of my all-time favorite Star Wars sounds is the fucking speeder bike from Return of the Jedi. It's to me, it's like the TIE fighter or like the blaster or the lightsaber. That that sound. Love that shit. So anytime I hear that, I'm down. Go ahead, get us out of here.
And this is what takes us back into what I was saying earlier, the closing of one chapter and the opening of the other, because they start doing the quick cut between the flashback and the current. Yep. And you see them flying off the planet when he was a kid, and it was in the wreckage of the ship where he hid the box to begin with. Yep. So, and then he's flying out on a new ship with his new mentor. So it's that changing of the guard. It was very well done. It was telling a story without saying a word, which is, these people know their craft and they're doing it to an expert level.
Dude, true. I think my final takeaway from just in terms of just the overall scenes that we're seeing here, and I don't think I sent this to you for to throw in as a graphic, so I'll definitely send it in later. Dude, I'm completely hung up on Karn. Completely. This dude with like the 1,000-yard stare at the end of this shit, his uniform's covered in dust. He's been captured. He's been traumatized by this. He watched his guys get blown up. But I'm saying, just whatever. It's still covered in dust, but still, so he's been through some shit. There's no doubt that he's traumatized. He's now seen combat. He's seen the direct implication of decisions you make about being overeager, about thinking that everything just happens like it's a script and that the good guys are always going to win because he's the hero in his own story. And he's just standing there just like looking out like he knows he's done. Like he done fucked up, got guys killed. He's obviously impacted by it. And when you see episode 4, he's not in it much, but he is in for a couple pivotal scenes. He's impacted by what happened, and it's not just on like the professional level of like, oh no, I lost a battle and he got away. Like, dude, this dude is broken. And the actor actually sells it, which I'm so glad that I didn't write off the character or the actor just based on that first episode buffoonery and like clowning that like he's super high-ranking mall security guy, because it was so annoying, dude. I hated it so much. I'm like, oh, dude, they're just taking another straight white dude and making him a joke, and this and that. And this reminds me that you can't find, just because you think something is one thing in a show, you got to actually let it breathe for a minute. You can't have the woke radar on full time all the time, because it eliminates the opportunity for you to actually have development. Yeah. And I have to remember that.
And the other thing is probably running through his mind is he was told this was supposed to be a cover up. The chief told him, just let this go.
Incident report, bro.
And now he has more dead troops on his hand at his own command this time. Not someone murdered them. This was on his orders. So these deaths are 100% his fault. Even though technically Andor blew him up, the order to take the hill is on him.
Dude, did you happen to catch, and I think they said it, I don't know if they followed through with it, but like, how many guys, when he was doing his pep talk, how many guys were there? Like a dozen or so, give or take?
It was 12 guys and 2 officers, 14 total.
That's what I thought, because Mosk was like, he asked him, how many do you think we need? He goes, 12 just to be certain, yada, yada. And then they divided into 4 teams, 3 teams of 4 probably, something like that, until they all converged.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
3 teams of 4 for 12, and then Mosk and Karn. So do we have a body count? Like, how we know for a fact the pilot died, right? Because he crashed his shit.
Pilot, at least 4 were blown up. That's
what I'm saying. It looked like about 4 guys scattered.
Between the,
I was just counting the transport, because it looked like a bunch of guys hit the ground in the street.
It looked like it was 3 at the transport and at least 1 or 2 at the warehouse.
That's what I'm saying. So he legit lost like half his guys.
Yeah.
Now, I wonder if it could have been an additional kick in the nuts if Mosk had died here. Would you have written that in?
No.
Like, is that enough of a? No, too much, you think?
No, because based on his position that he took. Because you have to think, he's the battle-hardened one. He's the one who has the knowledge. Yeah. So he knew
he could still be randomly done in, though.
Get the high ground, get the rifle.
Yeah. And he was up there.
And that's like, I think he's going to have an further, like, he's going to be, because these were his men that were killed. It was his platoon. So Karn made the call, but these are his guys. So this is going to lead to more of him wanting to be involved of the hunt for this Cassian Andor.
True. Good points. And that's why we bring you in to make those good points. Because I'm a big fan in these things. Like if somebody's down, you kick them when they're down, in terms of like, the story and the effect. And because one of my complaints with the Disney stuff on the Star Wars and the Marvel side is I think they typically, their run times are usually too short to bear out having the ensemble cast that they want. But this show's running long. I don't think any of these episodes are going to be under 35-40 minutes, if I'm right. I think everything's right around that neighborhood.
Yep. So far they are.
So they're going to be able to, so they're going to be able to give you B-list B-level characters like Mosk going forward. They'll be able to have them have involvement. I bet he doesn't make it out of the series. I bet at some point him and Luth, both of our principals, Karn and Andor, are going to lose their mentors. I guarantee it.
Yep.
And then it'll be a battle between these two by the end. Which dogma won out is going to be how it wraps up. Anything else on how the episode wraps up?
No, I actually liked the ending because, how many episode run is this? I forgot.
Oh shit! No, you put me on the spot. 12.
I think it's
13,
12. So
like
you can see this as a 4-parter. 3 episodes, 3 episodes, 3 episodes covering the story. So this was the closing of the first part of it, which makes sense because it was the same director, same writer, same DP. Now they're going to go off to edit these 3 episodes while the new people come in and take control before he comes back for his next 3 episodes.
I think Tony Gilroy's back for the final. He's back for the final 3, I think. So he's off until 10, 11, 12.
Yeah, where he has his brother writing as well. Right. But he's still the showrunner, so he's in charge of the whole show.
This is his baby. Oh, 100%.
Yeah, but his writing duties are going to be down. He gave up the writing duties on a few episodes, let other people, so he can concentrate on actually getting the show off the ground and stuff like that. But he also Oh, go ahead.
Good.
I was saying the director steps away after this one, and we'll have the new director for episode 4 5, a new director for episode 6, and then Tony's back for 7 and 8, and then the new one that only had 1 episode gets the final bit of it.
Oh, true. But an important. Actually, you answered the question I was going to ask you when Brother Dan is actually up, and he's in charge of the next 3. Dan Gilroy has 4, 5, and 6. I think if I read the wiki right.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look.
No, don't put you on the spot. I want to just talk to a second about, like, we were talking about showrunners, and I think that's yet another thing that seems to be missing from the crap that Disney Plus has been spooging out all over the place. Like, if you look up writers' rooms, who gets credits for some of the shows, like, She-Hulk is the most recent. There's enough people that are credited with writing credits on these shows to basically field both sides of a football team. And I'm like, how does that make sense? Like, you and I have collabed on things in the past, but it's us two having similar interests, similar, hobbies in our games and our movies and our music and things like that. So there's a consensus that we reach when we collaborate on projects. You start bringing in a half a dozen people, 7 people, 8 people, 10 people. I don't care how tight you guys think you are. There's no way that perspective stays on point to give you something cohesive, especially if you then break that up and have 2 people write the first 2 episodes and 2 people write the second, unless you've got a showrunner in charge who's got some backbone, who has some experience, who's worked in the IP before, and basically has management experience, essentially. Is going to be able to keep ostensibly younger, less experienced people on track. Now, it helps that Tony Gilroy has worked with this crew of people before on a feature film.
Yeah,
there's a lot of, like you said in episode 1, there's a lot of crossover of who worked on Rogue One returning to work, at various levels of the production on this show. But I think that the reason Andor stands out as a superior product to me, and maybe even, I don't know, is it on the level of Mandalorian? Is it a little bit better in terms of overall, or is it still too early to tell? Maybe I'm rushing a judgment on that. So I'm going to pump the brakes.
Mandalorian came in at a time where hope in Star Wars pretty much died after episode 9 of the sequel trilogy.
Yeah. Awful.
And Mandalorian came in, took Star Wars back to its roots. And that's why Mandalorian's held very high with Star Wars fans.
Yep.
And then they came in.
It still trends really well in search. Even now, like if you Google trend it trends better than anything other Disney Star Wars, even this show.
And I think this show goes with those same people who actually care about Star Wars, other than people trying to cash in on Star Wars.
Do you think Andor is kid friendly enough to put it on a level with Mandalorian? Like, where's the merch for this show going to come from? There's not going to be any lunch boxes and backpacks or anything coming through from this show. I don't see it. And no one's buying a B2 EMO toy.
I think the cash in is on the attractiveness of the lead character.
Okay.
Putting his face on stuff.
That works for a demographic, the grown-ups that are going to watch the show and people that might find him attractive or interesting as an actor. And if this show sticks to basically being like a spy drama and they're not going to incorporate elements of like the Force and things like that, you're missing out on a lot of what I think people typically associate with Star Wars, even if it's not necessarily Skywalkers and lightsabers. There's always that element of mysticism, and Rogue One touched on that.
Yeah,
they did give you the blind, not Jedi, who was obviously a Jedi, and I'll go to my grave I'll die on that hill that he was 100% a Jedi. There's no way.
I was really hoping he was coming back for this, because they're bringing Forrest Whitaker's character back. He was on the same planet, which is the birthplace of the Jedi. Is where they were at.
Do we know for certain that the blind Jedi is not coming back?
I looked on the IMDb and he was not there. But he could be in season 2.
Is that Donnie Yu? Is that Donnie Yu? Donnie Wen, I think his name is.
I am one with the Force, and the Force is with me.
There it is. The Force is with me, dude. Exactly. Bring it, dude. Disney Star Wars. Bring him back. Bring him back.
Yeah, I was hoping him and his buddy.
Bring the other guy back with him with the heavy blaster. Bring them both back.
Yeah. And if they do, I can see it happen in season 2, as if they bring Forrest Whitaker back for season 2. Dude,
this is greenlit for 2. We know that for a fact. Yeah. And this one's going 12. And if they're all 45 minutes apiece, that's a lot of time to fill. Yeah. So maybe this is like a mid-season surprise kind of. Who knows? We'll touch on that. Well, let's wrap things up so we don't go crazy long. As much as I love it, I know we're coming up probably already past that hour. I'm betting.
Oh, yeah.
I got away from this again, but I love talking. Whatever. We'll run it through the silence filter and cut it down. But whatever. I'm enjoying talking about a show, and I don't get to do a whole lot of that. So I appreciate everybody that's watched at least up to the 5-minute mark. That'd be great. And if you guys have watched more of it, I appreciate that also. But dude, overall, let's wrap up on a global view. Let's talk pacing through 3 episodes. You're obviously watching more, even if we weren't doing the show together.
Yep.
I think this is
I'll
up your
definitely
alley.
be watching more of this one. This one would be one that I watch. I did pass over on a few because I just at some point you just have burnout.
Did you watch Kenobi?
I did not watch Kenobi. I was not interested one bit.
Did you watch Book of Boba Fett?
I watched half of the series. I didn't watch the second half.
Like, yeah, because I think I remember you like when I was doing like my running Facebook threads on a couple of how bad they were. I think you chimed in on a couple before we had actually started the channel.
I like the Mandalorian episodes, but that's because you know I like the Mandalorian. I thought it was a great series. I think they try to cash in too much on the Boba Fett fandom, and I think it actually hurt the Boba Fett fandom. Because Boba Fett had the least amount of screen time and one of the most favorite characters of the original
Disproportionate, no doubt. Yep. I think that the menace and the mystery was that entire character, and I think giving him a 6-episode miniseries where he basically prances around the desert doing, tribal indigenous rain dances
out of his prime.
Stupid. Dude, way too far. Recast younger. Put him on some bounty hunter missions with a dark boss that double crosses him. There's your series, dude. I give you that pilot by Sunday. You know what I mean? It wouldn't be hard to do. Pacing wise for me on Andor, through 3, I like what I see so far. I think that, like you said, episode 2, they could have cut that in half and applied equal half to either, episodes 1 and 3 and cut it down in the middle and give me an hour long. If Rings of Power can give me 60 or 70 minute episodes, Star Wars can give me 60 or 70 minute episodes. Yeah, and it's basically a movie at that point. But if it's good, I don't care. I'm at the disadvantage of having seen episode 4, and pacing wise, and I won't give you anything plot wise because I know you're one behind. Episode 4 feels to me like episode 2.
Okay, so
there's things it develops. They introduce characters. But that rubs me the wrong way with the ensemble stuff is if there's too many people, sooner or later they're going to fuck up and try and tell me who all these people are and where they went to high school and when they had their appendix out and who their first girlfriend or boyfriend was. And I don't know. So pacing wise, it felt like that.
And I understand they're trying to build a deep story and they have 12 or 24 episodes to do it and they're not doing it for season 2. But you do have the time. So, I mean, you can space it out a little bit. You do have, minutes to fill. As long as, like you said, don't get too convoluted and, start weighing down the story because you want to tell, the backstory of every tree branch.
If they do interesting things with the time they have, they can do as much backstory as they want. But I feel like when they start down that rabbit hole, invariably they run out of interesting things to do. And then they start diverting main storyline things that should have been for Andor to do, and they donate them down the list of the cast of characters to incidentals that we didn't need to be able to do those kind of things. But let's get out of here, dude. Should they be finding you anywhere online yet, or are you still in transit?
I do have a website, warriorteenproductions.com, but right now things... when we do the future one of these, I'll be in a hotel room or an Airbnb in another city. I leave this Sunday, so my side will look a little bit different from here on out as we finish the series. I mean, I don't really have.
You social anywhere? You don't really roll through on Facebook or Twitter with any of the Kingsley production stuff? Not on like a regular basis, right?
No, I don't. I do have a YouTube page with my short movie on there. You can go see that. That's Heroes Never Die. It's on the Warrior Team Productions YouTube page. There's 2 of them out there. I'm the one with the cool logo, not the cheap logo.
Yeah, true that. And as always, you can always check out what King Z and I are doing and some of my solo stuff at Winter Wolfsden on YouTube. We're trying to establish a little bit more of a presence on Twitter, but not much because it is a cesspool, and I hope Elon buys it. But I think that's going to do it for us, guys. Thanks for stopping by and checking us out. We had a blast talking about this show. I'm looking forward to talking with King Z about episode 4 because I have some gripes, dude. I'm going to warn you. This one's not going to be as we're on the same page. But until next time, guys, enjoy the hunt.